Hey everybody. Missed you guys. Sorry. I am on the road. You can tell by the background. I'm literally in an RV. The Griswold family truckster with my three pooches, traveling around the country a little bit but Curt Schilling, the Curt Schilling Baseball Show episode 40 is going to air anyway. Um, Lots to talk about. Had to wait for the All-Star game to get over, kind of look around, get the landscape. Always a great weekend. And for what it's worth, Bill, um, I talked about this on OutKick the other day. Major League Baseball hosts the only true All-Star game in sports. There is nothing's comparable to this. The NFL is trying to play flag football, and I understand too. By the way, the NHL doesn't play defense. The NBA doesn't play defense, and it's 199 to 188 in the NBA, and hockey's 15 to 12, and they play a 3-on-3. Baseball is the only sport that is a true representative of the game that you watch every day before and every day after.
Yeah,
So,
went into the eighth
uh,
inning, and all of a sudden, you really cared.
right, right, and part of me loved the home field advantage thing, because it did matter. Um, I kind of get why, and I was a participant in a couple where it did matter. But it's still, you don't have to do that with this game because you can't pitch halfway, you can't hit halfway. You have to play defense. So the game is the game, and you see the greatest players in the world doing some of the greatest things you've ever seen, and this was no different. Nationally getting a rare win. But we're at the break, and the break is it generally past the halfway point, a little bit, not far, but it's time to take stock. And woe is the fan in Washington, in Oakland, in Kansas
Kansas
City. I
City.
feel bad. I
Yeah.
feel bad. I really do. I feel bad for St. Louis because they're just not playing well. Um, but those have to be miserable situations. The A's stuff is just, the sooner they get to Vegas, the better. That's just a nightmare situation. The ownership in that city uh, deserve to lose that team. In the ownership, I should say more than that, but the fans stopped supporting him a long time ago, and you can't blame them. Kansas City is just, it's gut wrenching to see that a franchise that was very good when I was growing up has decided not to spend money, even though they have, I think, one of the richest owners in the game. Um, and they're paying for it because it's a great baseball city, much like St. Louis, Midwest. Yeah, speaking of St. Louis, totally underperforming. And I got to ask you, Bill, are there sadder fans in baseball than fans in New York?
No, no. The
I mean,
Mets fans
listen,
are a mess,
well, they should be. They're 18 and a half back.
and
And that's
seven out of a wild card.
right, right, right. They're out of it. And I'm going to say this with extreme amounts of confidence. The it's not the manager's fault in either city. I know both guys. I know them very well. These teams are horribly underperforming. I think in the case of the Mets, and I think the Yankees have been hit and been nailed by a ton of injuries. Now they need to play better, but still, I think the injuries have been a huge factor
Well, and I
in New
think if
York.
Aaron Judge gets healthy, the Yankees all of a sudden will start playing much better baseball.
Well, yeah, baseball isn't, in many ways. It's not like the Bulls missing Michael Jordan and he comes back and changes the lineup, because in baseball, you can avoid one man beating you. But yes, I agree. I think they'll be a better team. I don't know if they can play 9 games better than the Rays. They don't have to because of the wild card and the expansion to postseason. Um, but
Yeah, the Yankees are very much in the wild card race.
right,
All they have to
right.
do is play 5 games better than the
Well,
Rays,
they're a
which
game
will
out
mean
right
they'll
now,
be
right? Yeah,
hot. Yeah, they're a
right. They're
game
a game
out.
out. The Orioles, Jays, Astros. Which and I think I said this early in the year, that you could see the wild card, all three teams come from the AL East,
Oh, absolutely.
which would mean 4 of the 5 teams in that division would be in the playoffs. Which, I mean, I know it's crazy, but the Sox are 2 out of the wild card, which I think might shock a lot of people not in Boston.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
um, but a lot of
Well,
storylines, a lot of good storylines. The shock, to me, the story of as much as I would like to say I called it, I don't think it is the first half story. The Orioles, I think, are a huge story, leading the wild card. They're legit in every aspect. I think they're founded their foundation is there, and I think they're going to Adley Rutschman's going to be a Hall of Fame caliber player as long as he stays healthy. But the story in the American League, it has to be the Texas Rangers. And all that, no one. I think a lot of people looked at that division and said, Astros, Mariners were up and coming last year, and I think we thought, that they were going to be a player. They are, in a sense. They're 4 out of the wild card, 6 out of the division. But I don't know that any. Let me check that. I don't know that a lot of people were that down on the Rangers, but I think no one would have picked this without Jacob deGrom,
Right.
who pretty much has been absent and won't
Correct.
be back for the next year. They're 2 up on the Astros, and I think if you had said at the beginning of the year deGrom's going to make 6 starts in the first half, you would have said the Rangers are going to be probably where the Angels are. Which, by the way, very disappointing again to see the Angels be where they are, but that's going to lead to a much bigger story anyway. So a lot of people are going to be excited about that. So yeah, Rangers, Orioles to me, the Rays are just good, a good organization run from the top down. Would love to see them get into a situation where ownership in that city would spend money. I don't know if that market supports it. I still believe that team needs to move along with the Marlins, but that's kind of a story for another day. If we go to the National League, Braves are who we thought they are, right? Dennis Green. The shock, and I think they're equal shocks, although I think one of them is kind of a late bloomer shock and a bigger story. The Diamondbacks and the Reds, holy crap.
Absolutely.
And now we have to talk about the Marlins, but I think we all thought that the Marlins had some pretty good young talent. I think we thought the Diamondbacks and I don't think anybody thought the Reds had what they had. The problem is going to be that there's a couple problems. The Reds could be a bit of a paper tiger. I hate to say that because I love what they're doing. 22-9 the last 31. De La Cruz is very special in every aspect, in every sense of the word. But they're sporting a 5.91 ERA. And your offense is not going to hit every day of the second half. That has to change. So that becomes a team that you look at the deadline, because I think they're for real. I think they're talented. I think they're long-term potentially very good. Again, De La Cruz is a generational talent, along with I keep O'Neill Cruz from Pittsburgh. Those kids, they're special players. A lot of special players in the big league, but he has been at the forefront of the Reds resurgence in the last month or so. He's done some things. I mean,
and you talked about fan bases, Curt.
Yeah.
The Cincinnati Reds have reborn their fan base.
Right.
They'll play in front of full stadiums the rest of the year.
Well, and if you remember this, the Reds used to be the figurehead in baseball. For you younger fans, the Cincinnati Reds used to kick off the Major League season. Every year, the Reds played first, for the most part, on a Sunday right before Monday opening day. The Reds were the lone game, afternoon game. They were kind of the lone team, and they sold out. They were packed in a horrifically bad stadium. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the 1970 Big Red Machine was one of the most dynasty-driven franchises in Major League history. I think they reminded me of the 70 Steelers in the sense that I think the entire lineup was Hall of Fame caliber. Rose and Bench and Geronimo Griffey, Concepcion, Gullit. You had a great team. They played them and the A's in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
And how far they've fallen, which that stinks because again. Cincinnati is a very, very special place. So,
well, I will tell you though, the Reds pitching staff, I mean, Hunter Green is the real deal. And the kid they brought up in June, Andrew Abbott, has pitched great.
Yep.
And there's 2 up at the top, which gives you a chance. And on the backside, that kid.
Right. You
Alexis
say 2
Diaz,
at the top. Right. But the problem is you say 2 at the top
rest.
with no track record though.
That's true.
Right. Young kids
both
who haven't pitched not only haven't pitched into August for the most part, but have probably never pitched into September and have never pitched in meaningful games, 120 innings into a season. Doesn't mean they can't. I think this is where, when you look at a team and you look at a coaching staff, this is where a pitching coach is everything.
Yeah.
Because a good a Johnny Padres, a John Farrell kind of a pitching coach can steer kids through August and September because they can say, hey, listen, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. This is how you're going to feel. None of this should, and so none of that comes as a shock to you as a young player. It's still, your dad tells you a million times not to touch the stove, but you have to touch it and burn yourself. There's still the experience they need. You haven't faced Shohei Ohtani in a September game that matters for your division title, things like that. Not again, they may step up, but I love the thought of developing players in that environment.
Right.
Because next year when they're good, this won't come as a shock to big games in August, September. But that 5.9 ERA, to me, if the ownership is real and they had a great draft again this year, if the ownership is real, they will be a buyer at the deadline for starting pitching. They will be a potential Max Scherzer landing place, or whatever that might be, because they do have a ton of young talent as well. The other team, the Marlins, this kind of on coming from the other side of the coin. Top 10 in ERA, strikeouts in Major League Baseball, not in the National League. ERA, strikeouts, whip, and opponent's average. Their offense is hitting loose areas, and you and I talked about it in April. This guy could be a legit 400 contender. And you saw it at the All-Star game again. You just see things. You see players who are what they are. He sees 2 pitches, he singles twice, he's 2 for 2.
Right.
He's got a chance. He's got a legitimate chance. The problem is he's a contact guy, so he won't walk. And one of the keys I've always felt to hitting 400 is being able to draw the base on balls when you're struggling. You're not getting out of outs, because contact a lot of times, with rare exception, and I think he's a rare exception, contact is a dice roll. It's a coin flip sometimes, because you have to, but you can see his ability to guide the ball is very Rod Carew-esque, Pete Rose-esque, Tony Gwynn. He can manipulate a ball through the infield, and that's a gift. He's a special talent. It's going to be fun to watch. I hope like hell there's a chase, because there's not. I can remember, gosh, it was 33 years ago, George Brett in 1990.
Right.
Every day, George Brett was on the front page of every sports page in the country with the little box that had his batting average, and everybody was following every at bat. And now you're going to see with social media, every one of his at bats going into September, if he's still fighting this thing, is going to be available to watch.
I think the key with the kid is the first slump, which Brett went through, Carew went through, and figured it out to still be in play come the 1st of September.
And the problem with a guy who quote unquote slumps as a contact hitter is he doesn't stop hitting the ball. He just stops hitting the ball where players aren't. And George Brett, I don't know how much of a ball manipulator he was from the standpoint of being able to, George Brett had power. He was an all-around kind of a multi-tool hitter. I don't know that this kid has the, I want to believe he does, but when you have a slump, so to speak, as a contact hitter, it's not like other hitters. Hitters that go in slumps will swing and miss. They'll go 0 for 21 and punch out 13 times. Whereas Arraez will go 0 for 21 and strike out 0 times.
Right.
The problem is, unlike a George Brett, where instead of 0 for 21, he goes 0 for 11 with 10 walks, or Gwynn, it's 0 for 21 with 21 outs. So 21 at bats versus, and that has a dramatic impact. And a lot of the later in the last 30 years, anybody that you've talked about as a contender, and there have been a couple. I can remember Larry Walker at the break. There are a bunch of guys hitting 390 at the break. Is health, and not in the way you think. George Brett almost hit 400 because he was hurt for a big part of the season. So he had barely the minimum at bats to qualify.
Right.
Which math is simple. It's far easier to hit 400 over 350, 370 at bats than it is over 500 or 600.
And with the Marlins in contention, Arraez is going to be at the plate every game.
Right. And his God-given skill and the skill he's perfected doesn't slump. Guys
That's
that can
a good point.
But it's weird. Like I said, when you're putting the ball in, he can go 4 for 4 on a night and the next night hit this 4 same exact balls in the same spot and be 0 for 4.
Right.
Right. That's the difference.
That's
And
interesting.
so, yeah. And it really has a lot to do too with, and I got to tell you, if I'm pitching to him before the shift, I'm very comfortable. I'm moving my second baseman to the shortstop side of the bag as a left-hander. I'm saying, hey, listen, I'm going to throw him fastballs away. I'm going to throw him down. He's going to hit a ball on the left side. I'm going to bring my center fielder over to the left center field and move my left fielder way in. And I'm going to bunch the left side of the infield and just let him hit balls to the left side. Now, what he can't do is get out of himself, right? You see an offense shift or defense shift as much as they can against the rules now. He can't go out to after that outside pitch and try and hook that ball in the hole. He's got to stay himself and get that ball over the infield to the left side or hit it in the whatever. You can't let frustration change your approach. But I love the commentary around the All-Star game. You saw, I don't know if you saw it, but a lot of the All-Stars were telling him they were rooting for him, and he was like, hey,
Oh,
he
yeah.
was kind of excited about that, which I thought was very cool. To a situation that isn't very cool, St. Louis, and it's one of the teams that I regret never having played for because it was a great city. It is a great city, and the fans are phenomenal. Probably one of the bigger disappointments, and I don't know. That might be strong because I didn't have the Cardinals as a powerhouse. I had the Cardinals as possibly a winner in the Central because the Central didn't look strong to me.
Well,
Not
and it's
because I
still
thought
really, I mean, it's not that strong. The
no,
Reds
it
and the
isn't.
Brewers don't have runaway
No,
records.
no. But nobody saw the Reds up top with the Cardinals
No,
11. Nobody saw the Reds 11 and a half games better than the Cardinals at the break. I don't
no,
believe.
no.
But I didn't see the Cardinals being a dynasty type division winning team because they were so good. It's like I saw it as maybe the division might not be as good. They can't pitch. Their starters have an ERA around 5. I mean, this is kind of staggering. The opponent's batting average against their starting staff is 295. That's absurd for a single pitcher, much less a group. And then the knee breaker, the back breaker, the same thing I think that's really had a dramatic impact on the influence in New York is blown saves, late losses. They've blown 16.
Yeah.
Which is tied for the most in baseball. They're tied with the Nationals for the third lowest swinging strike rate and have allowed the third most hits of any team. In short, they're hittable. Great. That's a great summary, John. John does a lot of stat compilation. John and Cal are the guys that help us do the show. John is the guy who kind of provides the guiding notes that Bill goes over and we talk about. And there's some really cool stuff in here, and that's a good one. They're a hittable staff. They're a hittable staff, and the problem is that, man, if you're a hittable, that's one thing you won't see on successful teams in October. Right? Because hittable staffs, they may make the playoffs, but you don't get through the playoffs. You have to have swing and miss pitching to win in October. They're ranked 21st in outs above average, which means they've given away. There's only 20. There are 20 teams better than them at playing defense in a sense. And when you have a pitching staff that doesn't miss bats, you can't have a defense that doesn't catch or doesn't execute fundamentals. And if you think about the Cardinals, they've always been that team. The Cardinals and Orioles, to me, are kind of, they've always been facsimiles of each other. Player development organizations, they bring up young players. They're baseball players when they get to the big leagues.
Great fundamentals.
They understand the Cardinal way, the Oriole way, and they play professional baseball. Everything happening in St. Louis would lead me to believe otherwise, and I can't imagine the fans being very happy about that.
We talk fantasy every once in a while. Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty, Miles Mikolas, and Adam Wainwright were all drafted in the top half of drafts.
Yep. Well, which goes along with what preseason expectations was. It wasn't that I think those guys, most of them were drafted as rotation fillers in a good way.
Right.
He's going to get me wins. He's going to his peripheral numbers are going to be manageable. They're not going to blow up for me. Because everybody expected them to be good. You can't, when you're drafting fantasy pitchers, there is an absolute prerequisite, and I think good fantasy players do this. You have to look at the defense behind the pitchers and the ballpark, right? The ballpark. St. Louis is a fly ball park. If you want to execute and win in that park, it's a fly ball park. You want guys that are fly ball pitchers with a good outfield in a fly ball park. And I think that they've kind of gone against them. And then you know what? Let's just jump to the other side of the spectrum. I expected them to be good. I think I might have, and we'll go back and look. And by the way, I'm going to say it again. We're going to go back and look at our preseason stuff, and I'm going to have John and Cal dredge up all of our talks and predictions preseason to see how good and bad we were. But I know we were talking about the Braves as a very, very good team. Might have the best player off. I'm sorry. Let me check that. I have to remember that Ohtani is alive and he's real. Might have the best offensive player in the game in Acuna. Who I don't know that 50-50 is out of reach for him.
I think it's in reach.
And I can't think of another player alive. Well, Alex Rodriguez might be one that I may have thought that of. I don't know that there's another player alive that you could say, he's a legit 50-50 guy if he stays healthy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe again, we'll go back and look. I expected the Braves to be good. I'm not sure that I expected them to be this good, but in all of these conversations that we're having, you can go back and trace them a basis of this conversation to the thing we did talk about very ardently for the season, which was the change in the schedule. The Cincinnati Reds are better because the Cincinnati Reds are getting more Rockies, more Nationals than they were getting, the better teams in their division. The Miami Marlins, same way. They're not getting. They're losing. I think it's 6 games per. So they're losing 6 to the Braves, 6 to the Mets, 6 to the Phillies, and getting 3 or 4 from the Pirates and a bad Cardinals team and a bad Rockies team. I think all of these conversations have something to do with that. Same thing with the Braves. But they're really good. And if you go back to the 90s, when everybody talks about the 90s and Glavine and Schmaltz and Maddox, people forget they didn't pitch alone. They had a phenomenal offense. They had Chipper Jones. They had Fred McGriff. They had Ron Gant, Dave Justice, Ryan Klesko, Javi Lopez. They hit. They could have had average pitching and still probably been contenders, if not won most of those division titles that they did win. The problem was they never had swing and miss pitching, except for Smoltz, who was the only guy in September you feared in October. Now they do, though. Everybody has swing and miss pitching now for the most part, except for the Cardinals. But the Braves are, let's see, what is it? Top 3 in runs scored, slugging, on base percentage, team ERA, 8th in batting average allowed, leads major leagues in home runs. Right behind the Braves on the major league home run board is the Dodgers and Rays. Braves are 27-4 in their last 31. They're the 11th team in the last 23 years to win at least 60 games before the break. So what do you do as a Braves fan? You just want health for the second half. You want to, and I heard this for the first time in hockey playoffs this year, which I think it's a legitimate concern. You have to manage workload in the second half, especially with your young pitchers.
Right.
You want those kids to be as fresh as they can be because the adrenaline will be there in October. What I don't want is adrenaline to overtake fatigue from the standpoint of a young kid trying to do more than he can because of how he feels physically.
Right.
And so manage the workload.
Freed and Soroka and Strider, you want to limit innings. And
you want to limit the high stress stuff. So
gotcha.
What I do want to eliminate is 8. You know what I'm saying? I want to eliminate 8 innings in a 1-run game. I'm okay with 7 innings in a 13-2 game.
Gotcha.
Right? Because so that's what, and that's where I think you have to manage the young pitchers is in a 1-0 game. If I throw 85 pitches over 8 innings, I'm far more drained, tired, and sore the next day than in a 9-0 game where I threw 122 pitches over 9. Not even close. And as I got older, that changed. But when you're young, everything was max effort, and then you start to learn. So I guess what does that all mean? I'll tell you what I think it means. I think it means that the trigger gets pulled in New York very, very soon. And they're 18 and a half back. There's no chance that they even sniff
No,
the NL East. And I don't think there's much of a chance of them being the wild card team.
me either.
So what does that mean? Verlander, Scherzer, uh, Senga, who has been up and down.
I
But
don't
but
think,
let's go back. Hey, WBC. What did I tell you?
you know,
Was being a winner in the WBC or having your player in WBC worth Edwin Diaz out for the year? Because
right?
I got to tell you, their blown saves and late inning bullpen stuff is directly tied to Buck having to rearrange his bullpen at the last minute.
Absolutely.
And that's not an excuse for it comes down to the player. Listen, and I told you this, Bill. Buck Showalter is as good a player manager as anybody from the standpoint of he will never have the wrong matchup. He will never have the wrong pitcher against the wrong hitter or the wrong hitter against the wrong pitcher. That being said, you put your players in the best position to succeed. The players have to perform. And the fact of the matter is they're not doing that.
No,
And I got to tell you, you know what, Pete Alonso's just run the bases, dude. I get it. You're a home run hitter. Your team's 20 games out, horribly underperforming. You're pimping a home run in a game I mean, come on. I want to root for the kid because it's a good story, but don't be a dick, right?
right.
Don't be here's the thing. All of the attention on your team right now, none of it is positive. None of it. And not that is a big deal, but he's playing in New York. Let me remind you, and I said this early, I've said this before. In New York, in Boston, to some degree in Philadelphia, and I'm not thinking everywhere right now. Boston too. You play 3 games a day. You play the pregame media, you play the game, and then you play the postgame media. Don't give the media more to talk about in a negative sense than they already have. Because in New York, they're going to make stuff up. They're going to create because that's what the New York media does. There's never has been very many good media people in New York because in my generation, because it turned into a shock profession. I want a headline and give me a headline. And New York, I thought was the first place ever became, I want the news first rather than I want the news first and fast rather than accurate. And you've got 2 markets in New York competing. And the Mets, and here's the thing, you're in New York. You signed the contract. You knew what you're getting into. And I think we talked about this as well. New York has to always approach, and I think Brian Cashman has done a great job of it. They have to approach a free agent signing with the New York factor included as a piece of a trade or a signing that other teams don't. Philadelphia's the same way. Boston's the same way. Chicago's the same way, I think. There's a piece to it. Both these teams suck. The Yankees, I think they'll. I think Booney. I got to tell you, it went under the radar. I absolutely love Sean Casey as the new Mets hitting coach. And you'd have to know Sean to understand why. It will be physically and psychologically impossible to not be happy in the Yankees clubhouse for the rest of the year. Sean Casey is one of the most positive human beings I've ever met. He is infectious in a Rex Hudler kind of way. Like, it's impossible to be in a room with Sean Casey and not feel good about yourself when you leave. Not to mention the guy hit 302 in his career. He was a hell of a player.
Well, and
hell of a player.
If you believe the New York media, he may have Shohei Ohtani in that dugout because they already have that as the destination.
Right. Well, again, that the New York media has everybody going to New York.
Of course.
But right. But it's true though, because and if New York is really, if the Yankees are legitimately a player, and they're a player for everybody, so there's no reason not to think they aren't, right? Not to mention, how does Shohei Ohtani not look at the right field ports in Yankee Stadium and say, yeah, I'm in.
Okay.
But if there's a team that would go out there and say 10 years, 625 million, is there any doubt the Yankees would be that one team? No, there isn't. And they have a lot of young talent. They can make the trade. That's the next story we're going to talk about. But yes, New York, the writers always have everybody going to New York because New York is always a possibility for everybody, which I think is funny and great. It's good for baseball. But Sean Casey going in as the hitting instructor is an under the radar, enormously big move. I laugh because I look at that pitching staff, and in my head, I'm saying to myself, "You give me 60 days with that pitching staff, and we'll have a 650 winning percentage the rest of the season." And because the pitching coach at this point becomes a good pitching coach becomes an enormous influence. And I'm not talking about making Garrett Cole a different pitcher. I'm talking about being able to walk these guys through what August and September, July, August, September look like on a good team in a big game, and how you can. There's different approaches. Things change now. You have to approach and be different. Physically, psychologically, you're generally seeing the league for the third time. You're not seeing usually anybody for the first time. So interesting stuff. But I think New York is going to be a huge seller. And I think Steve Cohen, the unfortunate part is every owner in the game is laughing and smiling about it because
Yes,
they
they
don't
are.
like what Steve Cohen did. And I feel bad in the sense that I wanted to see Buck Showalter is going to win a World Series somewhere. And I thought this was the team, but they've just underperformed. And the Diaz injury, don't go to sleep on the fact that that was a massive, massive thing. And not as much on the game itself by getting the saves, but on the fact that late inning losses are far more impactful and devastating to a team than any other kind of loss. So, speaking of losing, heading into the break, the Angels were 1-9 in the 10 games going in, and the fact of the matter is Shohei Ohtani has now, not quietly, but through his interpreter, and I'm not listen, guys. I've been involved in the game as a player, excuse me, long enough to know that there is and Bill, you may find this interesting. There is you need to have a Japanese interpreter explain to you commentary by a player because the interpreters don't always translate what the player says verbatim.
Right.
The interpreter will take a message. The player might say, "You know what, this guy sucks," and the interpreter will translate that as, Shohei says that he thought he had a bad night. I mean, to that level and that degree. And so, because I remember when Dice K was oh my goodness, I totally forgot his name. The left-handed reliever we had who was so instrumental in us winning the World Series in 07. Anyway, we had a couple Japanese speaking people in the organization, a couple trainer, and then they had their interpreters. And I can remember multiple times when I was told by a Japanese or an Asian or Japanese speaking member of the team, whether it be a coach or whatever, that's not what he just said. He just said this. And I thought, and I get it, but I think that there is a less of an independent voice for the Asian player. And this is me. This is not something I know, something I always claimed. I always felt like there was an overriding message that Japanese players wanted to send as a group, or not were under orders to send because it's Japan and they can do and say what they want. But there was always a sense of national pride that interpreters would never let players embarrass themselves. Now, I don't know.
I totally believe that, Curt.
Yeah. And I heard enough from, like I said, from other Asian speaking and Japanese speaking and Korean speaking members of our staff that, hey, that's not actually what he just said. To know that there's some degree of that.
Which I think is interesting, that in one of the All-Star press conferences, Ohtani actually said, playing for the Angels, losing sucks.
Yep.
And that was actually interpreted as losing sucks.
Yep.
For that to come out, that to me was a big deal.
It's a huge deal. Because it's a huge deal because you go back all the way to Nomo, and you think about Ichiro and all of the. I mean, these guys are supremely talented. And Ohtani might be the most talented human being we've ever seen. Were always about the team. They never made comments that drew attention to themselves, even though Ichiro was psychologically, I think, a 1960s flower child. He was a very deep thinker and said a lot of things that were very like, wow, he's really into, they don't ever do things that draw attention to themselves, especially quotes like that.
Yeah.
And listen, when you're saying, whether he knows this or not, maybe he doesn't, I don't know. But because I was guilty of it at times too, when you say, God, we suck, and you're a guy that isn't sucking, Shohei Ohtani's not referring to himself, right? He's not saying I suck. He's hitting 320, leading the league in home runs. He's the ace of the staff. He's having a great year. He's saying that the 24 guys I'm playing with are bad players. Not obviously, I'm paraphrasing, right? But what do you think that quote gets in New York, Bill?
They're
right.
still writing about it.
Because I'll tell you the difference. In Anaheim, the writers don't do what the writers in New York would do. In New York and Philadelphia and Boston, the writers would leave his locker and immediately go to another player's locker and say, hey, Ohtani just said you guys suck, looking for a reaction.
Right.
Then it becomes a story outside of the real, all of those things. And those are things, Ohtani is going to bring massive amounts of following and revenue wherever he goes, right? You're looking at 100 extra press passes every night. You're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in added revenue through merchandising, through television, through advertising, all of those. His contract will pay for itself in the first year, but I swear, and I'm not exaggerating. When you think about the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in television advertising, now you open up yourself to the most popular Japanese player in history. That market is now going to become, you're going to have more Japanese viewers than American viewers for games of teams he plays for.
Which is why I think that plays into whether they trade him this year or not, because of all the revenue he's bringing into the Angels, even with them going 1-9.
Yes,
in the last 10.
Oh, it's different though in this sense. And I'm again, this is just me. On the nights he pitches, everybody watches the Anaheim Angels. I'm not so sure that's the case on the night he doesn't pitch.
He still gets 4 or 5 at bats.
I totally agree with you. But when was the last time you turned a TV on to watch one hitter play for one team? That was horrible.
Nope, that's true.
Right? I hear you. I'm the same way. I'm going to watch him play because I want to see him hit. I want to see him, all those things. But when you're talking about television ratings that will go, that's why I think his trade price is way higher than what it might normally be, right? Hey, listen, we're going to trade you this guy. And most teams are going to say, well, listen, I'm not going to sign him. I'm not giving you 3 top prospects. Now there are going to be teams saying, oh, okay, what do you want for him? Because the Yankees recognize this dude's another 150 million in advertising revenue. He's 50 million in merchandising revenue. So who cares? We want to re-sign him. We think we can, but even if we don't, he's going to make us better, and we might make the playoffs. We make the playoffs. Holy crap!
Yeah.
What is the Asian audience for the team that he plays for in the play? There's an enormous revenue. I always say, and I use this number very, very lightly because it might be way higher and it might be lower. A World Series is $1 billion windfall for a team. When you factor in all the things that it translates to, right? It's for a team. For the Yankees, no, way more.
Yeah.
For the Red Sox, way more. For the Mets,
the East Coast
more.
teams, $2 billion.
Right. For the Diamondbacks, nah. For the Mariners, maybe yes, because that's a huge Asian market. And by the way, that's kind of my sleeper team for Ohtani. And you saw at the All-Star game, did you not? So, and I'll talk about that at the end here because I'm going to mention some All-Star moments. And one of them is kind of like that moment. The new rules are working. You and I talked at length about this, Bill, and the things that we thought the pitch clock, you knew it was going to decrease the game time, and it has almost a half hour, which is a huge deal. You saw teams change their beer selling policies, which I thought was funny because they're not going to miss that half hour of beer sales.
Very true.
So they're going to right. Stolen bases are up by almost 25%. You have to understand what an enormous number that is, because we're talking about 32 teams up doing something a 25% more than they did last year. That's a lot. And we knew it was going to happen. And so I think you're going to see, and you saw De La Cruz the other day steal second, third, and home, which was embarrassing. Awesome that he did it, but it's embarrassing because that's the result of a pitcher's getting 5 minutes in the minor leagues and getting to the big leagues and not understanding how to hold runners. That should never happen, ever. As a pitcher, it's frustrating. It's embarrassing because Yes, he's incredibly talented, but it shouldn't ever happen. A runner should never be able to steal home. Not to mention, it wasn't even on a pitch, by the way. It was because everybody was just standing around with their fingers in their butts, not paying attention.
Here's my question to you about the new rules. Do you
Yep.
think the new rules have benefited to some teams and some teams haven't adapted, or do you think it's equal across the whole league?
You know what? Everybody plays by the same rule.
Right?
So you either Max Scherzer spring training and adjust and figure out how you can use the rules to your advantage, or you just play, or you complain about it. And I think any good managed team, you've seen them, they adjust, right? Buck Showalter, Terry Francona, the good managers in the game, Aaron Boone. Okay, you can be almost a Belichickian response. Bitch all you want inside this room, but after we leave this room, I don't want to hear another word about it because there's nothing you can do about it. Everybody has to play by the same rules. Deal with it. And I question. I really want to see some science behind this because, one of the questions that you had mentioned and John had actually asked is shorter game times help older teams or younger teams. I guess I would ask you if I have to do 30 sprints, or let's say I have to do 105 10-yard sprints, am I more exhausted having to do them in 2.5 hours or 3?
Right.
I don't know the answer to, what I'm saying? I don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing the 3 hours. And I've watched, and you can see if I actually went back and looked at the video myself to see if there was similarities. I was always not laboring, but I was breathing heavy. I've seen guys breathing like they're kind of wind sprinty, exhausted. I think you've seen the last Rich Garces for the most part. I think you've seen the last fat pitcher because cardio is now in play way more than it used to be. Because now again, you have to make those, and I'll call them 10-yard sprints because that's, to me, that's the exertion of a pitch. You have to make those 15 10-yard sprints inside of 20-second intervals as opposed to 10 minutes. So yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means. Is it a short-term exhaustive thing that actually ends up being a long-term benefit because you're not on the field as long? Right? Those, because the reverse is true, right? If I'm in the box for a shorter period of time, my defenders are also in the field for a shorter period of time. Which in the dog days of August, when day games, when it's 145 on the field, absolutely beneficial to the everyday players.
Which is going to be interesting in places like Texas.
Yes, I want to see the science because there's science behind this. And God, if Theo was still, I guarantee you, Jed Hoyer in Chicago, holy crap. I guarantee you they have data about how our players play after a day game or before a night, whatever. So, okay, listen, gonna close it out with my top all-star moments. My first two are memories. Well, actually, no, they're my first three. Reggie Jackson homering on the roof of Tiger Stadium. I think it was 72 or 73 as a member of the A's, which now guys go over the roof routinely. And Mantle did that like when he popped the ball up, but it was a big deal when he did it. But the first real vivid all-star memory I have, I told you this, I grew up a Pirate fan, was Dave Parker throwing to Gary Carter from right field in the All-Star game. And I can't remember who he threw out, but it was one of it's still to this day is up there with some of the Clemente throws as one of the best throws in the history of the game. And that was in the All-Star game. And then finally the Pete Rose on Ray Fosse, although I felt bad for Ray Fosse. That moment would never happen in another All-Star game.
No.
And that is the purity of the baseball All-Star game. Go back to, if you remember, 2002 was the tie All-Star game in Milwaukee, right? I think 2001 or 2002. Anyway, you remember Torrey Hunter robbing Barry Bonds of a home run?
Yes.
That doesn't happen in other All-Star games.
No.
Right? So the moment. So my personal ones, my number one is my that same All-Star game. I got the start, and my first son was 5 years old at the time, So he was with me getting autograph. It was awesome. And the day before, Fox had mic'd me up, and I decided that I was going to challenge Alex Rodriguez. And so I went to the batting cage before BP when the American League was hitting. And I said, and I didn't really know Alex, but I said, hey, Alex, he's like, hey, he's very cordial. I said, if you come up, I knew he was hitting third. I said, if you come up tomorrow and there's nobody on, I'm going to throw you nothing but fastballs. And he kind of stepped back and side cocked me and was like, what? I said, I'm not lying, man. I said, if you come up with nobody on, I'm going to throw you nothing but fastballs. And he kind of gave me a smirk. I said, no, I'm serious. I want to see if the best hitter in the world can hit my fastball when he knows it's coming. He's like, all right, bro. So he comes up the next day. And if I remember right, I started him out with 99 on the black away. And I think he took because he was like, is this real? And then, or it might have been in, but I went away. I went 97, 98, 99, if I'm not mistaken. And the last pitch was, I think, like 98 on the black on the inside corner, a literally unhittable. I threw three of the best pitches I could possibly throw as hard as I could possibly throw them. And I was like, and apparently the mic wasn't doing, the audio didn't come through real well at Fox because I'm not sure if they even have it still. But I remember thinking to myself, okay, that was pretty cool. I just told the best hitter in the world, here it comes. And, so that, and then probably my favorite like moment, like was, I had an Ohtani in Seattle experience in 1997. It was, obviously the deadline is after the All-Star break. In 97 in the Phillies, we were stinking. I had a total no trade clause, and the Indians had made it very clear that they would like to trade for me. Mike Hargrove was the manager, and this was the Indians team that should have won. This was Lofton, Bell, Ramirez, Tomey, Sabathia, Cliff Lee. These guys were Brian Giles, Alomar. That was the conversation. My wife and I, and I had my in-laws with me. We got off the plane in Cleveland, and the gate agent in Cleveland began the sales pitch. Hey, Curt, how are you? This is a great city, man. There's some. So I was like, oh, that's funny. And then in the airport, people had signs in the airport. Come to Cleveland, come to Cleveland. Like, they knew my flight. They were at my gate. I got into the limo, and it was a couple, a lady and a man up front. And I think they took the long route, and they did so to show us school districts. Like, this is one of the best schools in Cleveland. This is a great neighborhood. Here's where the players live. And it was incredibly flattering. And because Bill, like you, I grew up with baseball. I was a fan long before I was a player. So I get to the game, and I'm getting the sales pitch from fans, yada yada. However, and you can go back and look at this because it's on video. The player introductions, I believe I was, including the Indian players in Cleveland, I believe I got the loudest ovation. And I was like, wow, and I was blown away. I was humbled. I was incredibly honored. And it obviously it didn't happen, but that was so fun because it was so fun for my family to experience that, because it was like being on a college recruiting trip or being a free agent. I had a fallback in the sense that I had a contract with the Phillies, but it was just so flattering at a time when Philadelphia, the front office, had refused to commit to bring in talent, and it was frustrating. And the fans in Philadelphia were frustrated as well. But it was such an amazing experience and something I'll never forget, and something my oldest son Garrick still talks about to this day. So
that's tremendous.
Yeah, that was so fun, so fun. And then I'll give you my last. There's the one other experience I have was 1999. Everybody remembers the 99 All-Star game at Fenway when Pedro Martinez struck out every hitter in the ballpark, and won the MVP. But the moment I remember was standing in the bullpen when Mr. Williams came on the field in the golf cart and went to home plate, and Major League Baseball, both teams surrounded him at home plate. And I was mad because I wasn't part of it, but I was also starting the All-Star game. So I was okay with that. And I was starting against Pedro. And that because I knew Mr. Williams from being in the Red Sox organization, and I loved, and he was such an honorable man, and an amazing man. And someday I'll tell some stories about him. I have one of my most amazing stories ever is about him. and his history. So there it is, guys. Ran a little long. I wanted to give you guys a little extra today. Apologize if that was inconvenient for some of you, but there's a lot going on. The All-Star break, second half of the season, going to be a lot of fun, and there's some amazing. And this trading deadline, I think, is going to be fascinating. I think you're going to see multiple $100, $300, $200, $300, $400, $500 million players move teams. The team we didn't talk about, team to probably talk about next week. What's going on in San Diego?
Yeah,
right. That's a head scratcher. So
yeah,
again,
there's whispers out there that Soto could be on the move. Which
yep. Well, and I mentioned that because that's another guy I know to be an exception. Bob Melvin's one of the best player managers I've ever been around. So be curious to know. Anyway, John, good stuff on the notes, buddy. This was outstanding contribution. Bill, a pleasure always. I'm gonna hop in. I might actually have a peanut butter jelly sandwich in my RV, and then continue my drive back home to Tennessee. So,
do you share it with the boxer or no?
Well, so I've got my Puck, my French bulldog. Ellie is my princess, my little Maltese. Ellie's 13, going on like 160. And then I have Thorin. Thorin Oakenshield is my oldest son's English bulldog, who is just a hot mess and just awesome. But they eat as they see fit. They've been getting snacked out crazy, and they're all kind of just sitting here waiting for me to do something. So I will catch up with you on Tuesday. Missed you this week. Hope you had a great week, buddy.
You too.
And we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Excellent.
Oh, hey, by the way, guys, OutKick.com, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast now, Apple, anywhere, you can find the Curt Schilling Baseball Show on those sites. Always want you to go and find it through OutKick, because that's the group of people I love and work with. And I think we're growing something really special here, but you can find it anywhere. Subscribe and like and spread the word. Check out our Twitter feed. If you want anything addressed on the show, send us Bill. Your Twitter address again is
BGESPN at BGESPN. Okay.
And I am at Gehrig, like Lou Gehrig, GEHRIG, at Gehrig38 at Twitter. And by the way, real quick before I go, congratulations to Zach Gallen on the All-Star game start. What an awesome thing that was for a kid so young and a kid so talented. So have a great week, guys. I'll talk to you. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you on Tuesday, Bill.